Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Comic Book Cove. I'm Tom Morris.
And I'm Josh Holderbaum.
And Lady Margot Elise. Well, Josh, we are finally at the end of the Suicide Squad, Justice League, Suicide Squad. Let's just call it is this one big crossover battle royal finale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one really big crossover. Kind of the first big crossover at DC Rebirth, finally under our belt.
Yes. We've been reviewing issues the last few weeks. So there is a Justice League vs. Suicide Squad, and then there's a tie-in issue, and then there's a Justice League of America Rebirth issue. And that will, of course, conclude this week's titles, but we got a few other ones to talk about as well. Mm-hmm. So let's tell you what we're talking about this week. In this episode of Comic Book Cove, we're going to discuss the following titles. The Flash, number 15. Wonder Woman, number 15. Teen Titans, number 4. The Kamandi Challenge, number 1. Justice League vs. Suicide Squad, number 6. Justice League of America, Killer Frost Rebirth, number 1. And Suicide Squad, number 10. And as always, spoilers ahead. The Flash, number 15. Rogues Reloaded, Part 2. You can't go too long without reading Flash and not have the Rogues show up. The Rogues are a very unique group of villains for any superhero because they have kind of their own little understanding with the Flash. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it was funny when we were doing the Godspeed story arc and the Super Speedster story arc, where we only see the Rogues really for one little panel in one comic, and they see the news that all the other Super Speedsters are being created, and they say, "Okay, time to leave.
Yes.
Time to leave Central City for a while."
Right.
And it was kind of bad not seeing them back, but it's nice to see them back all of a sudden.
What are they up to?
Well, right now, this issue starts out with the Flash thinking that they've gone down to the country of Corto Maltese to steal a giant statue of Mercury. Mercury being the Greek god of speed. And it's also, the influence for Jay Garrick with the helmet and the little wings on his boots.
Yes.
So it's a sort of a jab at the Flash, really, looking at that. So, of course, the Flash ends up going down to Corto Maltese to find them.
Well, the statue is also made of gold and jewels. So I would imagine it would be a little tempting for a group of rogues to try to steal.
Yeah. And, of course, that all ends up being a distraction by Mirror Master. And the other rogues weren't even there.
Well, what were they doing the whole time?
Well, it looks like they were trashing many different parts of Central City.
What?
Which the Flash only realizes when he goes back to Central City.
Okay. We didn't talk about the Rogues Reloaded 1, but the issue before that, the Flash was kind of wondering what's going on with Captain Cold and the rest of the Rogues, because he hadn't heard from them. Well, we see that he took the bait, he saw the plans. Mm-hmm. They've planned this out pretty well because usually he's fighting the Rogues together. Now they're separating and they're all going separate targets. Flash is saying, how am I going to combat all of this at once? Mm-hmm. He's used to taking them out one at a time, or as a group. How successful is going to be one at a time, where he has to be divided?
Well, and it was funny, too, because when he's fighting at least the Mirror Rogues, he actually takes them out pretty quickly. But when it's just one-on-one with Mirror Master, and Mirror Master is using his powers, using all the mirrors in there, creating the big giant mirror monster, the Flash actually takes a longer time taking him out when he realizes that it's just him. So that might not be good news for the Flash. I mean, I think of it kind of strangely that he's a guy who can cover so much ground so quickly, but the Rogue splitting up seems to really screw him up because he says in this issue he doesn't know where to run.
Right.
He doesn't know where each one might hit at any given time.
Who's the leader of the Rogues? For a little background on the Rogues, in case new viewers aren't quite familiar with the Rogues, Rogues are usually led by Captain Cold, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
What's his backstory? Why is it that when you talk about Flash, you have to talk about the Rogues?
I might be mistaken on this, but I think Captain Cold is kind of one of the earliest Flash villains. Mm-hmm. Classically, he's just a common thug. Mm-hmm. He ends up getting a cold gun and turns himself into Captain Cold. And I think that's kind of part of the appeal of Captain Cold and the Rogues, is they're kind of just normal guys. With usually a superpowered gadget,
right,
like, a cold gun, or Mirror Master's mirror gun, or Weather Wizard's little weather wand, and stuff. that got kind of mixed up with the New 52, because with the New 52, Captain Cold actually got cold powers, and he could, shoot cold blasts from his hands, and that kind of turned me off, because all of a sudden he wasn't really a normal guy.
Right.
It was just, and that kind of seems to be the appeal, and it's very gang-like. They kind of have, they have their own set of honor. I mean, they supposedly they don't kill, and they don't for most of those comics, and they even mention that there are newbies among them, like the Trickster.
Yes.
The Trickster is the one who has to keep the time in this, and Captain Cold even threatens to freeze him when he's not keeping the time. that made me laugh.
Right. I enjoyed the issue. If you watch the Flash TV show, you see a lot of the rogues. And what I like about the rogues on the TV show is that the actors who play the brothers in Prison Break are the rogues. So there's a lot of chemistry. The main one, Heat Wave and Captain Cold, a lot of chemistry there. And it just looks like when you read this issue, you fall back into another classic. This is the Flash. This is what makes the Flash tick, and they add a new wrinkle with bringing in a couple new ones, couple updates on the characters, but it's still the core Flash. Next issue, it promises to be very exciting on, well, what's the Flash that's going to do? They got hit all the time. He can go in many different places, but I think the Rogues have something grand, at least rogue-wise, planned for him.
Yeah.
And also, we can't not mention, but there's a little budding romance with Captain Cold's sister, which is called, her name is Golden Glider, and then Mirror Master.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Golden Glider has been dead in comics literally since before I was born.
No one's ever truly dead in comics.
I know, but she stayed dead for a long time. If I'm not mistaken, I think she was one of the casualties during Crisis on Infinite Earths. When they rebooted the DC universe after that, or at least made the alterations from that, she had died sometime before that.
Right.
And before that, she had been involved with another rogue named the Top, who could spin at super speeds, and eventually found out that spinning at super speeds makes you smarter. Don't try that at home, kids.
Remember when we were kids, we used to spin around?
Yeah, I know.
And that made me smart, made me dizzy and fall.
Yeah, unfortunately, that didn't happen.
Right.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the Golden Glider ended up dying before that. While she was involved with the Top, it was one of the Top's schemes. Of course, being the sister of Captain Cold, that doesn't sit well with Captain Cold. That led to kind of a schism with the Rogues. That really came to a head with the Rogue War story arc.
Okay.
In the late 90s, early 2000s. Now we have Captain Cold, when he's doing his little narrative in this comic, he's introducing all the Rogues, and he mentions when he gets to the Golden Glider, not only is she his sister, he also mentions that her powers make men unable to touch her. And he says that's a good thing. And then,
Right.
it's not long after that, there's the chemistry between her and Mirror Master. It makes me wonder, is Captain Cold going to be okay with that? It'll be interesting to see where that goes.
Right.
Too.
Well, The Flash number 15, great issue to read. If you enjoy classic Flash stories, there's nothing more classic than the Rogues. I would suggest reading it because it is fun, and we'll see what happens with the Rogues in future issues. Wonder Woman number 15, The Truth Part 1. We haven't talked about Wonder Woman in some time, and during that time we had the dual story arcs of her trying to find Themyscira and her origin, and it now kind of seems like we're at the tail end, we're starting a new double story arc. But Wonder Woman, when she went to Themyscira, she thought it was Themyscira. It turned out not to be, and unfortunately that was her breaking point.
Right now, Diana is locked up in a mental hospital in London. That's essentially Steve Trevor's way of keeping her safe.
Yes.
Because that was sort of his idea to send her there. Right now, they think she's just a delusional lady called Diana Prince who thinks she's Wonder Woman.
Yep.
And their reasoning being that if she was really Wonder Woman, she'd be able to leave anytime she wanted to. At this point, she's not even sure of who she is.
Yep.
And that kind of seems to be for the best because there's this organization called Godwatch that is trying to find her.
Okay.
And if she's locked up, they're not going to be able to find her, but that's also a lot of pressure on Steve Trevor and Etta Candy to make sure they don't fall into Godwatch's hands.
She's off the grid, literally.
Yeah.
Literally, she's off the grid. And reading all the issues that led up to this, she doesn't know what is up and what is down. She had that mental breakdown in front of Steve Trevor. Thankfully, Steve was there. But for one, she doesn't know what Themyscira is. But that doesn't mean it's not there. As you see in that issue, it's still out there, but just not where she knew. So something must have happened for her memories, or it's locked away from her. But I don't think it's locked away from her, because the way her mom was talking, they just wonder when she'd be able to come home, when she'd find her way. So there's some interference. And could it be Ares? Could it not be Ares? Could it be the tree with the symbolism? That tree, that we saw that tree in right before Rebirth started with the end of the Justice League. One of the Amazons is kind of overseeing baby Darkseid. So I don't know if she's hiding in that
Grail.
tree.
Grail.
I don't know if she's hiding in that tree, and that's the symbolism.
There was also the mentioning in this issue when she has that. You see a big sort of splash panel of her thinking about the tree, and there's a guy in the tree. There's a very male figure in the tree, and they had mentioned that Steve Trevor was not the first man to set foot on Themyscira. There was that other guy, I want to say his name was Alexander, who was supposedly born on Themyscira to an Amazon, and he's in parts unknown. That was something Wonder Woman was probably going to track down at some point. That makes me wonder, could he be involved? Could he be in the tree? I don't know. Because isn't this the same tree that the snake came out and bit Diana on the hand?
Yes. Because they talk about the tree, that they're going to stand the line there. The tree has gotten bigger.
And we know Ares had mentioned when he meets Wonder Woman during the Year One story arc, he wants to go to Themyscira because he says he makes some ominous statement that he wants to go greet all of his daughters or something. Some really creepy, evil thing that I'm sure is no good for the Amazons. And it makes me wonder, if Ares didn't know where Themyscira was before, how could he grow a tree there? Anyway. And even then, in this issue, we have Diana sees a snake come out of that snake bite on her hand. And this snake, who they don't name, essentially tells her that it's okay to not know what's real and what's fictional, and that you'll figure it out at some point, probably. I love how he says probably at some point.
Maybe
and
not.
It makes me wonder, would that be something from Ares? Is Ares trying to get her back? Trying to help her get back? It hurts my head thinking about all the possibilities of this. But, it does make me wonder, why would Ares want to help her unless there's some other force and he's trying to maybe ally her, or maybe he's trying to keep her away from Godwatch. We don't know what Godwatch wants to do.
What are some of the secondary players, the secondary supporting cast in this issue? They've got a couple of them watching over Diana. What about Barbara Minerva and some of the other ones? What's going on?
Godwatch reintroduced Dr. Veronica Cale, which is kind of a classic Wonder Woman villain. She was created sort of to be her Lex Luthor. She's a relatively average businesswoman. She classically, she kind of felt almost violated by Wonder Woman, that she had spent all these years climbing up the ranks to become powerful. Here comes this giant essentially an alien. It's a lot like Lex Luthor and Superman. They feel threatened by that outsider. She sends in Dr. Marina Maru and her poison unit. Dr. Marina Maru being the daughter of the original Dr. Poison. Again, head hurting, which is also worth noting. A version of Dr. Poison might be in the Wonder Woman film. There was one of the trailers had a gal that looked an awful lot like her. So we might be getting an adaptation of her, probably a World War I German adaptation, not a World War II Japanese adaptation. I know too much about Wonder Woman. They end up attacking Etta Candy's installation. What did they call that? The pit? That was it. Had the fissure. It had some name. They raid that. Etta takes off. They kill off a bunch of their supporting cast, so she's on the run. Steve Trevor's on the run because he narrowly kept Wonder Woman out of the hands of the Poison Unit, and they've lost the trail on her. And so Etta Candy ends up going to Barbara Ann Minerva, who, as it turns out, was once a member of Godwatch. And she's the one who fills them in on so much of this. And of course, she and Etta are pretty close. Steve Trevor's not super keen on Barbara.
Right.
I mean, she was the cheetah for that fairly long time. So, and at the end of that, Barbara ends up turning herself over to the poison unit and telling them, "Take me to Dr. Kale." And Etta and Steve managed to take off.
They went looking for someone.
Yeah. They said if we, Etta said something about if we can't trust the new friends, we'll have to trust the old friends.
Yep.
So they go to what looks like kind of a, homeless district, and the guy they find looks like a Minotaur.
One of classic supporting cast in Wonder Woman.
Yeah. Very, very surreal to see that. And, especially when they're asking the homeless guys, and you see the guy pointing over there.
Over there.
No, guy with the horns, he's over there. I want to see what that conversation is like. Yeah, but
didn't he say, "Why have you found me?" or "What have you? Why did you look for me?" Something at the end, or
I think Etta says something like, "I know you only told us to come to you in an emergency. This is an emergency."
Yep.
Something like that. So it's bad news.
Whew, a lot to take in such a short issue, but I'm going to throw it to you, and because you know a lot about the Wonder Woman, what do you think this story arc is going to lead us to?
I don't know. Given that we've seen Hippolyta on Themyscira. I mean, they actually brought her back, not the fake blonde not Hippolyta on not Themyscira they had a couple issues ago. It does make me wonder. I mean, who's trying to invade Themyscira, or invade or poison it or do whatever, and then I would assume Wonder Woman's probably going to make it back to that, but she's got to get her faculties back, and I'm wondering how that's going to happen.
Wonder Woman's been a great read. We haven't talked about her in a while, but trust me when I say, if you are able to read the back issues, get caught up with her, and read some of the trade paperbacks that are coming out now, you can read all the collected editions of Wonder Woman pretty much in all one sitting, maybe a couple sittings, but there is a lot to take in. And that's a great read. And with that, we're going to take our first break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the Teen Titans and the Kamandi Challenge. We'll be back in just a moment.